Do you dream of moving from being a product manager to a product leader? Well, in this episode of Fearless Product, we're going to learn from 5 experienced product leaders what they found to be the most surprising when they first started leading product teams. Being a product leader is a great role, but the clearer you are on what it is and what it isn't, the more successful you will be at positioning yourself for these opportunities. These are the product leaders that we're going to be speaking with today. You can get more information on their background by watching their bio videos using the links below.
I remember the first time I was a product leader and there were a ton of surprises. I think I took the role because I wanted to really work on product strategy. I was super excited to think about the direction of the company and how we were going to evolve our business. I, of course, like everyone else, had a ton of feature ideas I wanted implemented and thought now that I'm in charge, we get to implement them. And then grim reality set in. So I think the biggest challenge and surprise factor for the heads of product is how much time you spend on people management. No matter how big your team is, no matter how many direct reports you have, there will always be an issue around an employee who's unhappy, someone you're recruiting, someone who is getting a competitive offer from another company, someone who can't get along with engineering but is really talented, design, there's so many different things. Like people management is just a huge amount of your time. So you have to be passionate about leading and working through those issues. Otherwise, you should find another job. The other thing is that I was surprised by, I wasn't the only one with a list of features that I wanted to get developed. So all of a sudden the CEO was at my desk with his list of features to get developed. And then there were board members who had ideas. And then there were other people who had ideas. And so what quickly was my product roadmap really is the company's product roadmap still. So don't get confused that it's not your chance to drive everything. Everybody's driving strategy. Everybody's trying to push forward. And so now you just are the one voice who gets to decide. And so all those voices are coming to you. Get ready. And then the third thing that also really surprised me, at one company I worked at, we called it the Star Chamber. And so this is the executive meeting, right? And everybody, knows when the executive meeting's happening and they always wonder what's happening behind those doors. And so now as head of product, you get to go into that meeting and it's not nearly as Star Chambery as it may look like from outside. Priorities are changing. They're trying to figure it out. It's a working team. And things are probably a lot less organized than they are presented to the company. And I think that's a function of life. Every company creates a plan, but that plan has to react to how users change, how competitors change, how the technology changes, how the industry is changing. And so even a plan is only as good as the number of days ago it was written. So it's constantly evolving. And I think that was always a surprise to me, as I thought, oh, we'll come in, we'll just execute our plan. It's super clear, but every week is a new thing and a new idea. And sometimes that roadmap you just made is a complete waste because we're going left instead of right. And I think it's a surprise to see how frequently companies are working through those things and always trying to figure it out.
People are crazy. And people all have their own desires, and people have their own missions. They have their own things that propel them. And it's like being a psychologist. Right. And so a lot of people come into product like, oh, cool, I'm going to come up with this new product and it's going to do this and this. Like, no, you're not going to do any of that. You are essentially you're completely at your people's mercy. And your job as head of product is to make your people shine. And so, the key is not your great vision. The key is not, whatever it is you think is cool or otherwise. That's like being an R&D person. If you want to be a product person, you are enabling a staff to be exactly what you probably want to be if you could, right? I want to do this cool product and do these cool features, and I think this would be really cool. That's what your product owners are doing. That's what your product managers are doing. Your job as head of product is not to remove your ability to scale. Your ability to scale is to empower these people. They don't work for you, you work for them. And to the extent that you think that people are going to work for you if you're SVP of product, you've got it all wrong. So anytime you're leading a product team, you're not. You're actually supporting a product.
I think what's most surprising to people when they start to grow in their product career is the concept that you now are responsible for setting the pace and the tone. And maybe it's a fine line, maybe it's a fine switch. I'm not sure. But I think about when I was a junior product manager, I had leadership ahead of me, above me, that really was the one saying, we're going to go for this. We're going to go do this. And I never really thought about why, other than kind of broad fly, like, oh, there's an opportunity, a market opportunity, blah, blah, blah. But I never really thought about the process as to how that person actually got to that decision to set that as the direction. And so I would get direction and be like, okay, I worked at Orbitz, go build these APIs. Okay, I'm going to go build these APIs. And this is roughly what we need to do. And it was, as I started growing in my career, and as I started taking on more and more challenges, that's been the biggest switch that I've really had to learn. I've really had to internalize and really had to own and practice, where you get into an environment where now all of a sudden you're not being told this is the direction, you're being asked or expected to set that direction. You're being expected to have a very strong opinion, and to have an opinion in front of people that might be market experts when you're not, that might be experts on the data when you're not, that might be experts on the financials when you're not. And you have to turn around and you have to speak with conviction, and you have to speak with, and not just speak, but really internalize the problem and articulate the problem with authenticity, right? You have to be able to speak from your heart and your gut and say, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're doing and why. And sometimes I'm not going to have all the information, but here's the market forces, here's what I'm seeing, and here's what I'm laying out. And it's very, you're putting yourself on the line. You're putting yourself out there. You're putting your neck out there. You're basing your decisions on, like, this is me, this is my decision making, and I'm owning this. And I find that switch to be a really big switch. I find that switch to be a really big switch with more junior people, or more people potentially earlier in their careers, as they get later in their careers, when you have to call the shots. And again, it's one of those things where you have to call the shots, not just for your area, but for lots of different areas that might impact a lot of different organizations. And so now all of a sudden, it's not just me building my cute little API over here, but it's me building a whole suite of APIs, me building front-end tools, me building an accounting solution, me building all of these things that now sum together to create a business or to create a product. And once you start to have to be responsible for all of those things, I think that it's a very strong and valuable responsibility. But it's also something I think that comes with practice. And I think it's one of those things where I see product managers that really truly own their product and are willing to make those calls and willing to go out on a ledge and say, no, this is what we're doing, are the ones that tend to be the most successful. Again, it's making bets too. One of those things is, as long as you're right 51% of the time, you're not gonna be right all the time, but as long as you're right a good bit of the time, I think really putting yourself out there and owning your product, speaking authentically, and then really kind of owning that decision making, that's the makings of being a really great product.
To address the question of what I found most surprising, as I started up my product management leadership career, as against being a individual contributor, many things I think, but the one thing I'll definitely call out is how much time is spent in doing non-product stuff. I think, and by the way, this is not unimportant stuff. To be very clear, they're all important things. They're things like, building cross-functional relationships, getting to know folks in the executive team, career development for your team, performance management, compensation management, managing a budget. There's all sorts of things which are so crucial to being an effective product leader. But if you notice each of those things, and you might say career development is a little different, but many of those things are not exactly directly working on a specific product. And if you're not careful, I think the thing you have to absolutely watch out for is that those other things, while important, can end up swamping all your time. And you sort of lose connection with the product. And I think that's the one thing that I found. Well, it shouldn't have been as surprising as I probably found it to be. So that's probably a learning for me, as in don't be surprised by the things like that. But it was initially. And what I discovered very soon was that not that you don't do those things, but what you do absolutely have to do is to structure and carve out time for product. And if you don't do that, then those other things will take up all your time. I mean, I mentioned a few of the things, but there are other things too. You're opening a new office, you're doing hiring, you're doing succession planning. All these things matter, and they will take up 100%, 120% of your time if you allow them to. I think the key is to, be focused on those things, but time box them. And it's not just a question of time boxing them. It's also, I think you do have to be very thoughtful in structuring product time. And, in my own case, the way I've tried to structure product time is I'll set up product reviews. I try to do, wherever I've gone, I try to introduce a product review process where I sit down with the product and design teams. We talk product and product features and the things that they're building. We try to do that at least once a week. And that keeps me very close to what is it that people are working on, and also gives a chance for product people and designers to shine. And it's not just me, by the way. I typically invite other product executives. I'll invite other folks from across the company for those sessions, and it gives them a chance to sort of show off their skills and abilities to a broader audience. But it gives me a chance, and the broader exec team a chance to also provide input early into the process. So you're very, very close to the product, which you otherwise wouldn't be. But in addition to that, trying to hold regular all-hands meetings, trying to do your one-on-ones religiously with your direct reports. I think, by the way, I'll spend a minute on that. One-on-ones tend to be, you look at your calendar and your calendar starts filling up, and the one-on-ones become the most obvious things which are at risk. And without a doubt, the thing I've learned through, deep and sometimes bitter experiences, it's don't jettison the one-on-ones. Make sure you carve out time for them. I've come to an acceptance that, I do my one-on-ones once every 2 weeks, but I spend an hour for them. Because I found that doing the shorter ones, you end up, in a 30-minute session, you end up with just 20 minutes worth of real content. With an hour, you get at least 50 minutes. You can go really deep. Anyway, those are examples of some things I do, but there are multiple things like that. Doing design reviews, doing product reviews, doing your one-on-ones regularly, doing skip-level meetings with your team members, and also, doing things like, in my last role, I would invite people I'd worked with before to come and talk product management with my product team. And it was a great opportunity. Many people are looking for ways to expand their repertoire, so they're happy to come. But it's interesting for your team to see somebody doing product management in a very different way than you are. And the most interesting takeaway for me from those meetings was not that some people would come and say it was great you hosted. Most people loved the session, but it was the next day when people would come back and say, what, so-and-so came to speak. I really enjoyed the conversation, but I didn't agree with them on these topics. And I'm like, that's awesome. I love that. In fact, if you came back and said, oh, it was great and I enjoyed everything and nothing in my life has changed because of it, well, that's not that worthy. But if you came back and said, I passionately disagreed with this element, or I passionately agreed with that element, that to me is you're internalizing it. And so, I find that those kinds of sessions really useful. But nonetheless, I think, long story short, keeping close to the product while managing a bigger team, I think is a balancing act, but one that we have to do. So that to me was the biggest learning.
First off, in terms of something I don't think most people realize when they go from being an individual contributor product manager to being a product leader is similar to what happens to most folks when they go into management or leadership roles, that they don't realize that the skills that they developed as an individual contributor do not necessarily equate to the skills they have to learn as a leader. They're always connected, of course, and you can't manage product managers if you don't know what a product manager does. But I think there's a tendency for new leaders to try to brute force success for their teams by kind of just doing it themselves. Like, you almost can't stop yourself. You want to reach out and just show them what to do manually yourself. And in some cases, especially with high performing product managers, that works for a little while. You can brute force a couple of teams. You can force them to learn their strategy, to set a strategy. you can fix their stories, but it's not sustainable. I think that's one of the things that was the hardest to learn for myself as someone who was a strong product manager, and before that, a strong developer, a strong designer. Actually, I was a mediocre designer, but a strong product manager. Stepping into that leadership role, you just want to just do it yourself, and you can't. You have to delegate. You have to coach. You have to jump over that gap between being the strongest IC and being a strong leader and manager. There's a lot of nuance to learn very quickly as you step into that space, and the quicker you can kind of say, and admit to yourself, I don't know how to do this. Ask for help. Ask for help from your cohorts. Ask for help from experts, and learn that quickly, that these are these new skills you have to develop, the better in terms of your ability to deliver great product teams.
The new product leaders that I coach are often surprised to find out how much of their time is pulled inward towards the leadership team at the expense of spending time with customers and on product development. Fearless product leaders know that they must rigorously prioritize their time because it is their most valuable resource. They enable their product teams to achieve meaningful goals and create value for their customers and their companies by aligning the leadership team and removing blockers for their team. What did you find most useful in this episode? Please tell me by leaving a message in the comments below.